Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man whose scientific breakthroughs created a philosophical environment where the oldest myths and the newest theories could be wedded into what we now have accepted as the xenogenesis theory.
What? Tim Longo.
I'm guessing you didn't go track down the manuals and read those. No, I didn't. Is that where you got? I was like, that wasn't ringing a bell. I was wondering. This is from the lore manual, which is called, let me get this title right.
There's a separate manual for the lore?
Historical and Technical Briefing, which is separate from the gameplay document, which is, I think, just called gameplay. I don't know. I had that one open. It's like got the controls and everything. That document is called Gameplay Guide. But the first part is this other thing, Historical and Technical Briefing. And it's 39 pages of PDF, which I assume is the same number of pages that it was. And it's all about
your favorite.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's as far as I read. When I read that sentence, which is, I believe, the fourth sentence of the document, something like that, I went, yeah, I think I can close this one and maybe go to the gameplay document. I wanted to read more about the formations in particular. We're talking Homeworld. This has actually already come up in one of the missions sort of live where it says they sort of say, oh, it seems like they have the same kind of hyperdrive we do. And we based our hyperdrive based on the ship, from 4,000 years ago or whatever that brought us to Karak or whatever, and so they kind of are talking about this xenogenesis theory, which I would, I'd have to say is probably a pretty good theory, considering they had a spaceship that they used to base their hyperdrive off of. I don't know. This is why I don't read the lore.
Well, now I need to go find that PDF and read the lore.
I was very surprised it wasn't included with the GOG, and probably not with yours either. There was no. I had to go track it down.
They usually do have those.
Yeah. Yeah, they usually have all that stuff. But this was the remastered edition, and I guess they didn't think to include the original manuals. It's quite an oversight.
That seems quite an oversight for a remaster, which is the whole point. I mean, it does seem like a pretty heavy lore. I mean, it's high science fiction, so it's it's got we talked about how Halo came out afterwards, but it's got that sort of mysterious science fiction pseudo fantasy stuff going on, and then now they've introduced some sort of empire, which are like, who's that? And there's this mysterious group in the nebula, and so it's just a lot of nouns and names of things all thrown together, which is littlesome. So a 39-page PDF is not surprising now that you mention it.
No, it's not. I mean, it's also, though, it just, the contradictions are already evident. So I kind of like, you based your hyperdrive on a hyperdrive you had on your planet, but it's only now that you're coming to believe that life came from somewhere else. Like, it seems pretty obvious that that's the case if you have a spaceship on your planet. But the thing that she said when they met and talked about how it's the same hyperdrive, she said that they got it from their ancestors, which I thought was interesting. So they considered the crash ship that they found their ancestors, but that was a big assumption that made no sense. That of course it. Well, maybe the fleet commander knows something that we don't.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, early on, I'm looking at my notes for the first session, and I wrote down Planet of the Apes. Basically, like, they're going to get to the home world, and then Charlton Heston's going to be there yelling or something. It's a Statue of Liberty. I don't know, something. For some reason, I was thinking of Planet of the Apes, where we have to get home, but it's a circle. it's all, it's a cyclical thing. Yeah. Although I believe in 2, or maybe there's an expansion pack where you return to that planet that got destroyed. I feel like
I think it's called Homeworld, Deserts of Karak or whatever.
Yeah, right. Oh, is that like a ground-based RTS?
Correct. Yeah, it's a separate product, I believe.
Oh, okay. That's what I'm
It was a sort
of
intermediate game between Homeworld 2 and Homeworld 3, which is coming up this year.
So Dune, basically.
Yeah, basically,
yeah. Yeah. Okay.
No sandworms, I don't think.
No, something else similar.
I'm sure there's something.
And dragons. Nope, that's Star Wars. Let's see. Anyway. Yeah, there's no original, right? No original ideas. Though I will say I still think the ship designs in this are quite original, There's been a lot of motherships over the years, different designs. And of course, we talked about how the polygonal limitations were probably driving some of their designs. But it still works. Still works well, I think. And then now we're starting to see some other motherships and other big capital ships, which are very different. Which, I just got to hand it to them.
Yeah, I agree. Meeting the ominous meeting with the trading vessel. I forget what their group is named, but it's a Banusi or something like that. That is so terrifying. Bentusi, it was close. It was frightening. I'm like, you're sending your ambassador over there, and he's like going in. It's like, wow, there's all kind of lights. Looks like there's a lot of activity. I expected at any moment there to be, laser shots and
screaming,
and like, no, don't let him get any closer. I'm glad, it's nice that it's not a completely unforgiving universe out there. So got to be happy about that.
Voice, the VO is so important to this game to give it character for sure. And they did a great job. It just feels not military. I mean, it's got a military feel to it, but it's got that kind of just very like downplayed, monotone. We're on a radio. Battlestar, the Battlestar reboot did a pretty good job at that too, right? Of just feeling versus Star Wars where everyone's yelling and and it's like everything's urgent all the time. But this is, even though combat's happening, there's still very much, you get the sense that they're on the radio and it's, they're trying to be even keeled about things and not freak out. And it gives it a good tone. And the same thing with that. Yeah. Meeting that ship. There's even the fleet commander too. It's just got this, I don't know. There's this aesthetic to it that really works for me because it's so downplayed. Everything is. I mean, obviously, there's a lot at stake, and I wrote that down too. It's just they've reminded you a few times of like everything we got is here, So I feel, even though it's all math and simple resource sort of like constraints, every ship that is destroyed just has a different feel to it than something like Warcraft, where you just feel like you can make more. The stakes are higher.
Yeah.
But at the same time, everyone's professional. I don't know what else to say. What other word to use? But does that make sense? It's just
I agree. Yeah, it's very much that. I think I'm kind of curious to know, whether all the voices were professionals or not, because there are definitely some that sound more professional than others. To me, I don't know. There's not a lot of different voices, but they are getting a lot of mileage out of that. And then there's kind of a narrator, for the, I guess that's the fleet commander, maybe for the videos and things like that.
No, I feel like isn't it a male?
Oh, it's a male voice. Yeah, it's a male voice. There's also one that's I remember there was one that was also the fleet commander, like the destruction of the planet, I think.
Yeah, they probably do
so
both.
They mix, yeah.
And then there's like sort of like a squad commander or somebody who's talking throughout a battle or throughout, a mission.
Right.
And his voice is pretty good as well. But it's also, like you said, it's just not overdone.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate. because this era, I mean, StarCraft is literally the opposite, right? It's just like you got space cowboys and everyone's yelling and a caricature, and the aliens are caricatures, and everybody's just exaggerated. And this is very opposite.
Yeah. They're just kind of telling you this is what's happening.
Yeah, a lot more Star Trek, maybe Star Trek and Battlestar than Star Wars and StarCraft and things like that. And it's that side of it.
Let's start talking about actually playing the game, since last time we did a lot of talking around sort of the time. We spent a lot of time sort of establishing it in its place and talking about some of the things that set it apart. But I think it's good to start with the building blocks. We talked a little bit about the UI last time, but very little about the controls, other than to remark that I wrote a bunch of them down because I knew I would get them wrong, and I'm still getting them wrong. Even though I have them written down, they have not become second nature yet at all. And I don't really know why that is. I think it's the use of control and drag. That one I'm kind of finally getting the hang of. I have the toughest time with trying to give orders. There was I think the 7th or 8th mission where it's like, make sure you detail, it's such and such to protect your resource harvesters, whatever things are called. And that I couldn't do in the moment. Like I was like totally lost. In fact, I went back, well, we'll maybe talk about this separately, but I went back to start at an earlier mission rather than the place where I was, because I was dead in the water. I got to mission 8 and couldn't complete it with the resources I had. And there weren't enough resources in 7 either. So I don't know how far I have to go back. Probably to 2. I'm thinking just
7. Yeah. We should talk about it because it's interesting. I think 7 and 8, what was 6? I think 7 and 8 represent.
6 is the asteroids, I believe.
Oh yeah. So we should talk about 6, 7, and 8 because I think there's interesting mission design goals that they're having there. But and depending on, Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. I mean, the controls are. We talked last time about how they're. It's their own thing. They're not trying to. They're designing for a different game, right, than other RTSs, and they're not trying to transfer some agreed upon set of controls. There weren't really yet. Some things are pretty common, like the setting of groups and recall of groups. I think that's pretty similar to what we've seen before in other games of the time. But everything else is a little weird. All the right clicking is very strange to me. It's so weird to click on a space and say, I have to hit control to say go attack here or to move here. I guess you can also use the M key. There's a lot of things that feel a little like an extra step or something, and a mental switch for me. So I have been struggling with that. And in terms of the UI, I find it extremely difficult to interact with the world other than through my groups and control drag. So, when I'm actually looking at the game playing, and there's been missions where I've played almost entirely from the pulled out view. I forget what they call that, but that sort of very remote, very vector graphics.
Like the sensor.
Yeah, the sensor mode. That's right. But yeah, even in that, I'm just like, okay, I know what all these numbers are. I've got my resource things in 1. I've got 2 and 3 are 2 separate interceptor groups. 4 is my attack bombers. 5 is my corvettes and stuff, and then 7 and 8 are like my frigates and ion frigates. I think they're also frigates. I don't know. And then if I have defenders, those are on 0. So, I just that's how I'm interacting with the world. Is like, I need this type of group to go here. And I'm trying to be good about using the formations, which I know there are keys for, but I just use the buttons in the bottom left because I'm not going to remember all the formation they're like different F keys, like, oh, do Shift plus F4 to put them in such and such a mode. So how are you finding that?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to hear how you're playing versus how I'm playing. And I think, there's a lot of crossover, of course, but I think, when I started this session back up, the second session, there was a moment, I didn't do it, but there was a moment when I felt compelled to go replay the tutorials because I was just some of the fundamentals I just had forgotten, just of controls and stuff. But the thing that I've been reflecting on as you're talking is I'm trying to think, I guess other sort of standards like StarCraft have some of this, but they don't have the complexity because of the 2D aspect of it where I think they fall into this trap. But there's too many ways to do the same thing, I feel like, in this game sometimes, where you can attack things in various ways. You can select things in various ways. And I think I just fall into sort of like, I guess, some of my usual habits that they basically do as in the same way that other RTSs do, but because of the 3D aspect. So for instance, I attack areas more than anything, and so I definitely use groups. It's funny, our groups are completely flipped around. All my resource stuff is at 10, 8, 9, and 10, and then yours is at 1, 2, and 3 or whatever. And the resource controllers are there too. Anyway, it's just funny how people think differently. And so, yeah, I don't think I'm as efficient as I would like to be with things. I just fell into a routine of using, strike groups, and then I hit the button, and then I forget if it's left click, right click, or I put them all on hostile. So I'm, and I don't aggressive, and I don't actually do a lot of micromanagement. I just send them over there, and then keep tabs on them. I will occasionally.
Do they not start as aggressive?
No, and they come in. It feels like most of the time they are not. They come in
as that's a thing I would need to figure out then, because I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I feel like when a new unit comes out, they start as a defensive mode or neutral, depending on the unit. Some of them start as neutral, like some of them obvious ones like resource collectors,
or repair ship or whatever.
Or repair ships, yeah. But I think all the fighters and stuff I think come out. So I because as they come out, I add them to the groups, and then I notice that a group is both defensive and offensive, and so I just click on offensive again. So they must track individual units once you add them to a group.
So you're pulling up that so there's a context sensitive menu. Oh, is that also in the bottom left?
Yeah, it's in the bottom left. I don't use the right click menus at all. I forgot how to actually bring them up, to be honest. I only use the HUD and hotkeys, I guess.
Okay.
Or something. Yeah. And I do a lot of Control A, which basically, creates a disk of aggression, and anything within that space, they will basically go after an attack as they go. I don't think it's as efficient as it could be, but yeah.
I don't even know what the Control A is, so that's another one that's doing me.
It's like attack area, right? So it's like it tells them to attack a space. Anything that comes into that space, while they're on their way. I don't know how it prioritizes things in the space, and it's probably not very efficient to do it that way. And then the other thing I've been starting to do a little bit is, I forget if it's right click or left click, but you can get a group to escort your own units, and then I hit the guard command, and then I click on like a capital ship or something, and then those defenders will guard that capital ship, right? And that's their only job, kind of thing.
I see.
Or the multi-gun corvettes or whatever they're called.
Multi-gun frigates, yeah.
Yeah. And then the same thing for obviously repairs and things like that. But the other thing that I love doing, and it's actually how I got a destroyer right away, that was not mine is I used the salvage corvettes as much as I can. Though in 7 and 8, I'm getting wiped out, so I don't have them anymore. But I basically just stole 2 ion frigates pretty early on, like mission 4 or 5 or something, and then I stole their destroyer too before I even had the ability to research a destroyer. And those things are super powerful. Yeah. I mean, I had to take 4. I had to send 4 salvage vehicles to do it. It looks like it obviously scales based on how big the is.
In fact, I have a note from mission 3, which is the first time you have to use it. It's an objective to use the salvage.
Right.
But I didn't know I needed 2, and it didn't explain that to me. I mean, it was in the objective, but it wasn't in the voice. The voice told me what I had to do. I was trying to do what the voice told me to do. I sent the thing over there, and it was just there, and my guy stopped attacking it because the Corvette was attached. But nothing was happening, and the thing was continuing. And I'm like, oh, it must just take time. And then, meanwhile, it's killing all the cryo tanks. And I'm like, something's not right here. And it was the 3rd time I did it that I finally clicked on objectives and was like, send 2 salvage corvettes. I'm like, are you kidding me? Why did you not tell me that?
I must have heard that or something. I don't even know how I knew that. I think I lost 2 cryo trays, maybe.
I lost 2 as well. Yeah. I got 4. It was pretty. It was pretty. It was pretty. So they show you the flight recordings of the attacking army force, whatever, and that's pretty chilling. But then you have the reward of saving 100K at a time. Each time one gets aboard, it's another 100,000 lives that you've saved. And that's kind of like a big, it's a big number. You're just like, oh wow, 100,000 people I just brought in, 200,000 people. And it's really as the number keeps climbing, and then you're also thinking, oh, but I lost 200,000 people. And I don't think you could I think it would be difficult anyway to save them all. But it was really something.
You have to be really on it, and come in with maybe more units.
Yeah, you probably have to have the salvage corvettes already built so that you could get them in and on it really, really fast. Take 2.
Maybe repair them too. You could repair them at the same time, but it's and I love that animation when they bigger ships go into the side of it. That kind of panel opens up, and then the cryo trays kind of slide in, and then they orient themselves vertically, and then they slide into that thing. And then when you take over, like when I took the destroyer, they did the same thing. They opened up that side panel, and then this destroyer. Basically, it's hilarious because when you take something over, you have to bring it back to the mothership, and then it goes inside the mothership, and then it comes out like I don't know what you've done to all of the crew, but they're now your friends, and
I'm not convinced of that, but
I think
they may not be. They may just not be anymore.
They're not there anymore. They're in. Yeah, let's say they're in prison cells. I don't know.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I'm thinking they've probably been put into the food vats,
or ejected into space.
I read something recently where there was like a matter reclamator or something like that, where it would it would basically break things down into their constituent atoms and then basically 3D print the food and stuff like that. So you'd be eating food, and it's like, well, it could be waste. That could be if somebody died. That could be partly somebody who's dead. But it's literally down to atoms. So it's like, well, at that point, I mean, there's really there's no sense in which you're eating a person. I mean, we all are all the time, I suppose, right? Anyway.
That's wild. Yeah, that kind of breaks your brain a little bit.
Our atoms literally came from stars, so
yeah.
Anyway, not to get too not to go into those older myths and the philosophical environments, so we can merge them with the newest theories.
It's cumbersome. I mean, the game represents a leap forward for sure, but and I think you have a point later that you'll make about a topic rather about sort of some of the simplicity or the simplification that is occurring in this game versus other RTS, which I think is a good topic.
Yeah, I mean, we could go straight there.
Yeah. But it's just because of the 3-dimensional aspect of it. It's really interesting to see. It kind of equated to, maybe we talked about this in the first episode. Now I think about it, but I kind of equated to our discussion with first-person controls for like Ultima Underworld,
right?
And even Eye of the Beholder before you get to mouse look,
right.
And sort of people trying to figure out, well, how would we do this? And so it's definitely a leap forward, but it's just not quite there yet. But it's a lot. It's a lot to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really wise of them to simplify other aspects of the game as a result, because the first thing I sort of noticed, there's two major ways in which it seems simplified. Since you have so much cognitive load on just managing all that space, literally 3D space with all your ships out there, and only the 10 groups kind of to work with to simplify it, which is not enough. I mean,
yeah,
I had times where I was like, really, I want to select 1A, B, and C. I want to break out my groups, my interceptor group. The thing I'm missing is select all interceptors is what I want, is like select all units of type.
If you double click on an interceptor, it will do that.
Okay, that's good.
But I think they have to all be on screen when you do it. So like you're on camera, just I think that's how it works. But yeah, I do that a lot. I'll double click on one and then rebind. Yeah, but I agree with you. I agree with you. 10 is not enough.
Yeah. So the ways in which they've simplified things is, one, there's only one resource type, which is that's pretty common, I think, in the era of RTSs, is my recollection. You had basically gold. Oh, that's not true. You had gold and wood, right?
And StarCraft has 2 as well. You have the gas and the crystals. Yeah.
Okay. So they've simplified that down to 1, a generic resource unit. They're literally just called resource units.
Right.
So they don't even mess with it. They're like, this is your resource. There is a resource unit. There's a number. Everything costs an amount of that resource, and it's just a resource. It's not wheat and wool. It's just straight up a number.
Atoms.
Yep, credits. And the other way that they simplify is, in a lot of RTSs, 2D RTSs of the time, the building mechanics for building different types of units involved both a tech tree in terms of, well, once you can build these, then you can upgrade this building. You'd actually literally have buildings for each type. So you'd have a barracks, for example, to pump out soldiers, or I don't know, some kind of like a smithy to pump. If you have a smithy and a barracks, you can make I don't know, something with a better sword or something like that. I don't remember specific tech trees, but that was kind of the way RTSs were done at the time. This simplifies all this down to like literally, nope, you can just build things of types and it manages the queues for you. So if you want to build 10 interceptors and 3 frigates and a destroyer all at the same time, they're all just kind of getting built all at once inside the mothership. And as they finish, and of course the bigger ships will take longer, you'll just see those queues going. You can actually just watch, like, building an interceptor, zips right along, and then the frigate might take, I don't know, 5 times as long or something like that, and the destroyer way long. And you can see each of those things being worked on in parallel. It's a little tricky because if you're getting low on resources, that can like jam up everything. Because you'll pump through a whole bunch of resources because you're building the interceptor so quickly, and that'll stall out these other bigger ships that you actually are the things that you really, really need at that point. Typically is what happens. But in general, the building mechanics are vastly simplified over the 2D RTSs of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're really only protecting that one. Yeah, it's a really fascinating shift, and it'd be interesting to know how they came upon that. I mean, it makes sense. I wonder if the sequels, I guess, or sequel Homeworld 2 does anything differently when it comes to like, do other ships, are there other ships that can create other things? But I just in mission 7 and 8, because they're so there's a difficulty spike there, I'd say for sure. I'm starting
my
to
wall.
no, and I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm starting to micromanage the queue a little bit more, because you can
pause them.
You can pause them. You can order them. You know what I mean? So I'll click on a bunch of things that I want to build, and then I'll go in and I'll put one above the other. You basically can order, and you can even order individual. So like if you have 5 interceptors going, you can put 3 at the top of the queue and then leave the other ones at the bottom, or things like that. So it's just because like you said, these missions are resource constrained, and there's a lot of difficulty to it. And I'm running out, of resources essentially as I'm mining, I'm using them. So what if I have 600 resource units, I want to make sure that I'm building the exact thing that I want to build with those 600. But it's like, there's got to be advanced play with this game that is a whole nother level when it comes to, I fear, not to change the topic.
I fear that advanced level of play is what gets you to level 9.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, when this in level 7 and 8, they introduce, this alien ship or whatever that has these drones that are swarming around that are really hard to take out because they're small and fast, and it seems like they can kind of just keep making them out. And then they introduce the multi-gun Corvette.
Well, I mean, what I did discover with that, I got through 7 on my first try, but then I was in such bad shape that I couldn't get through 8. And then I went back to 7. I'm like, well, let me try that again, try to do better. And then when I went back, I got wiped. I wasn't totally wiped, but I didn't have any resource collectors anymore, and I had no resources, so I could hyperspace and go straight to my death because I just didn't have enough stuff. I knew that if I went to the next level that way, I would be doomed.
See, I feel like either 7 or 8, they give you, I don't know if it's a dynamic difficulty thing, but yeah, as soon as I got hyperdrive, because 7, I feel like maybe a bit of a Kobayashi Maru kind of situation where I don't think you can really win per se.
Well, so what you can do, I'll give you some pointers, is focus on the fuel ships.
Which I did do that.
Fuel ships are required for the drones, and what happens is if you take out the fuel ships, fuel pods or whatever they're called, the drones will just drift.
Oh, okay.
And then you can. So basically, what I was doing was like, okay, I will focus my frigates, my regular frigates, my assault frigates, on the fuel pods. I will focus my ion cannons on the capital ships. And I will just let the interceptors do whatever they're going to do with the other ones. And eventually, if I just kept on top of those fuel pods, and you can sort of see, because it's like, it's like watching a bunch of bees. They keep having to go back to the nest, which is the fuel pod in this case. And if you're just keeping an eye on like, I can see that they're going back, because they're constantly going back to the fuel pods. They're like because they're so fast, they obviously don't have a lot of fuel, because fuel is what, weighs a lot of stuff. Your ship is a sunk cost, weighs what it weighs, and then you've got to fuel it. And so they're going back and forth to those fuel pods, and there's kind of a rhythm to it. And you can actually just kind of pick out, there must be a fuel pod over there, because I can see them going back there, from their attack. And I just kind of kept focusing on those areas. So the first time through, I chased off all 3 ships, capital ships, really fast. I just ate it. I mean, my resource collectors got, really worked, and I don't really know what to do about that. I mean, it says you should.
You're talking about in 7 or in 8?
In 7, mm-hmm. Yeah. And then in 8, I mean, here's the totality of my notes for mission 8. I mean, normally I have several sentences. Mission 8, and now I'm dead.
Yeah. I'm in the middle of 8 right now, and I've taken down 1.5 of their capital ships. But and I was focusing on the fuel pods, but I didn't know why. But yeah, now that you've explained it, that makes sense. And then I'm kind of I have a sort of a group protected by my destroyer over mining at the same time, kind of off in the other direction. Even though they're kind of being peppered, they can't really seem to take out my resource collectors because I guess I have enough defense over there. I don't know. There's not that many drones, but I definitely need to look for the fuel. But those capital ships, I need all my frigates got taken out, so I need to bring the heavy guns, I think, over, because those weird alien capital ships have a lot of guns on them. And they take down fighters really fast. And then if you get in the front, I was trying to. Do you remember it was in 6 or 7? They talk about, probably 6, where they talk about orientation of how to attack capital ships based on the direction basically the direction there, or the side that you were in. Oh,
yeah, it was 5.
They're 6 weaker.
6 was the asteroids. 5 talks about it with the bombers. Yeah, it basically says they're weaker from the bottom, or they're weaker somewhere, wherever.
Something, and I was like, "There's no way."
I had no idea. So my notes on 5 is like it was almost the total bust, and I got really, really. I was like, I don't know if I can come back from this. But I guess I had taken out enough of their resource collectors that they weren't able to come back. And I felt what I felt I had done wrong was, and in general, I think my problem with the difficult levels is like, I don't know what I did wrong. But in 5, I kind of knew what I did wrong, and I feel like the game led me into it. It said, oh, you got to take out these capital ships over there, and they're resource collectors. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just throw everything over there, and they just ate it. They just got crushed because, of course, I didn't put them all together in one big formation or something like that where they would have gotten there at the same time. Instead, it was like, I kept throwing groups of 10 that were all getting there at different times and just getting worked. I'm there and I'm like, oh, wow, I have a handful of frigates and not much else. And maybe some corvettes, I guess, because those are also slow. And now I'm in trouble. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll focus on these resource collectors that are closer to me and get their resource controller, I think is the other term, which is basically the so you don't have to go back to the main ship, ship.
Yeah.
But what was amazing is that I actually turned around the game at that point, managed to turn that mission around, was, had my 5 or whatever resource collectors just working on my side of the field and was building up, slowly rebuilding. And because they didn't have much left on their side, I kind of went over and I think I got a couple ion things built and went and just took them out. So what ended up happening in that mission for me was the build phase primarily, not entirely, but primarily was at the end after everything else. Because I'd come in here with this army of like 80 ships or something like that. Oh no, more like 50 it looks like. So I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I did the right thing here, but I did not. It didn't feel great. Like I got through it, but at the end, I'm like, well, what? I basically moved on from 5. I was still building stuff, but I was at the point like all the resources are all the way over there. Collectors are really slow. I have to move on because I've got to record the podcast more than anything else. It was like, and I'm not sure I'm not sure I would have done that, A, and B, it felt like, I don't know, just wrong. I mean, it felt wrong to be doing all this building at the end.
Right.
And basically in preparation for that next level. So I don't know.
Well, it's like, yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit last time, but there is the sort of meta macro mission, right? So building anytime. I'm wondering in this game, because I do some, so 5 was, I don't remember, because that's when I think I stole their destroyer and maybe 1 or 2 ion frigates. And I don't remember how I got their capital ship down exactly. I mean, I definitely sent quite a few bombers, escorted bombers over there, and I think it went down fast that way. But the funny thing about 5 is after I took them out, I just stayed and scoured the map for resources. Like I wasn't doing anything other than that. And then I was doing some building. But I'm wondering in this game, because of the persistent aspect of it, which I love and is so unique, I think building at the end actually isn't a bad idea, because you are basically expending your resources to go to the next mission. You know what I mean? Because you're not sure what you're going to have, and you don't want to be building at the beginning of the next mission if you can help it, because that takes time. Now, of course, you don't know what you'll need as well, and there might be some new units you'll get access to and stuff. So there's pros and cons, but it's just an interesting decision that you don't really have another every other RTS is like every mission's a unique mission, right? You're building out. Part of the loop is actually rebuilding.
It's the build, yeah.
And then to your point, though, I agree with you on, because I had the same thing happen, I think, in that same battle, and it's happened to me in 8 as well. Attacking capital ships is similar to attacking a base in a ground-based RTS. It's like, when is the right time to go? What's the right configuration and number of units to go? Because base attacks, can often be very much a sad affair, because you're like, I've got everybody, I'm sending them over, and then they just get obliterated, and it turns out you weren't ready. And I feel that same loop sort of with capital ship attack, which I think is cool that they were able to achieve that. But the game, because I'm always so zoomed out and I don't quite know who's attacking who, and it's just a lot more opaque about what is succeeding and what's not succeeding, what's succeeding and what's failing. I think the formations I need to use more for sure. I think combinations, like I'm wondering if in tandem with formations, using that, my strike groups are all based on type, and I'm wondering if the strike groups need to be more of a blending, mixing of different types, and those are sort of your strike forces. And then if you use formations as well, then maybe you go after things in a better way. I don't know. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, like that there's some high end play. I mean, it's essentially a learning curve, right? The learning curve is at a certain point. I fear we may not get over the learning curve before we finish the game,
right?
And
if we
finish the game, and then there's sort of
I'm very worried, because I'm pretty sure this is where I stopped. 7 or 8, probably 8, because 8 feels like playing 8 today. I just was like, oh man, I'm not. I remember 7. I remember the tension of, oh my god, I can't hyperspace. Why can't I hyperspace? I remember that moment from whatever 20 years ago, and Chris Corey too, who was my office mate at the time, was also playing this, and I remember watching him actually, playing this mission and just being totally panicked, like what, and trying to get all his ships home and whatever to go. I do feel that that's a difference with the collection. The remastered collection, I feel like you originally had to. There's kind of a quick, like go ahead button. And I feel like in this mission in particular, it mattered that you couldn't do that because he was trying to get some of his slower ships back, so that when he hyperspaced out, he'd still have them. Otherwise, you lose them,
right.
And I think that's a big difference, and that even added to that tension. I'm not sad to have that benefit, but it made me remember that today of like, I think this is new. I think this was in response to a complaint. Because as I said, some of those ship types are so slow. The resource collectors are, oh my God, they're molasses out there. And I need them back. I need them to ferry those resources quicker. So anyway.
Yeah, the one thing I will say about 6 and 7 though, and I guess it's one of our other topics, which I think we can hit quickly and probably keep talking about, is it's such a trailblazing game that I think they weren't probably, well, from my perception, they probably weren't fully sure what they had, but they knew they had something. But the two-dimensional RTS was tried and true, and there are a lot of different tropes that had come out of that, and people knew how to constrain the player and how to mix up missions, like, for instance, a mission with no resources, right? And you're just carrying a finite number. StarCraft was kind of famous for that.
Or a single character.
Or single character heroes. And they did that a lot in StarCraft 2, actually. And because they're way into their story, so it's like, you want to escort a story character. But anyway, I had forgotten about how they use different simple variables in this game to mix things up. So it wasn't just the same type of mission every time. And so the asteroid mission I thought was fun because they blow those asteroids up and I think they become resources. Right. It's a little bit weird. It's like, okay, I don't want to have to just destroy rocks, but it felt very sci-fi, very space-like. And then the nebula thing, the traders,
felt like it was a cool break, as well.
Yeah, exactly. They're breaking, and then with 7, the fact that you didn't have hyperspace capability, even though it's mechanical essentially, because there's hyperspace. I don't think you can hyperspace anytime you want to in other missions, or at least I guess they put the button up, but I guess you just would fail if you did. But even though it was forced, 7 felt like this Battlestar kind of like escape moment.
Yeah,
because I didn't.
It felt like one of the special episodes that you remember, like the 22 minutes episode, for example, or whatever, exactly. Where it's like, oh man. Which for listeners, we got an email this week, like, what's a Battlestar? And because it's an American phenomenon, right? So, and of course we're older, or at least you are. But there was Battlestar Galactica is very much Homeworld's kind of story, same sort of thing. Our planet has been taken over by this enemy robotic race, or synthetic race, and it was a show in the 70s, and then it was rebooted in the early aughts, and they basically are trying to go from their original homeworld to a new homeworld, that they know of, which is called Earth. So it's kind of like that's the big like twist, and it's in the opening credits that they're trying to get to Earth. And in the reboot, there was an episode of the show where every 22 minutes there was an attack by a major Cylon, which is the enemy force, like one of their big ships, and they had to constantly be hyperspacing, which is exhausting to the crew, takes all this calculation, and you don't want to warp into the middle of the star, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of drama like that. This is just constantly happening and happens for like 24 hours or something like that. And they're all just dying on their feet. They're so exhausted. And it's one of those episodes that you're just like, man, that was a tense episode. And it's kind of like, it's set up by the conflict around the show, obviously, but it just kind of stands alone of just like, you don't really need to know much more than what I've told you to feel that tension of like just how exhausting it would be, to be besieged and have to fight off a wave every 20 minutes. So anyway, to set a little context for listeners who aren't familiar with Battlestar Galactica.
Well, and for mission 7, I don't, my assumption or guess would be that there's a certain rhythm to a typical homeworld mission we talked about. And I think 5 is probably a good example of that. Like there's sort of archetypes that are forming, and they form in any game, especially mission-based game, especially RTSs, of like, here's this archetype of mission and here's this archetype of a mission. And then based on the overall campaign design, you're kind of flowing those together to, have palette cleansers and have the pacing be different and not have it be monotonous. And then, one of those archetypes is just the big epic battles, which take a lot longer, and there's a lot of resources on the map, and then there's resource constraint, etc. Homeworld has its own, of course, and 5 being, you against another capital ship or whatever, and just kind of 2 fleets going at it. And then, like for myself, sticking around after I won and just kind of like, it could have been 10 plus minutes of just mining, you know what I mean? After I was safe. But there's a certain rhythm to it. And then 7, it's like, okay, we need to do something that's going to kick them out of their routine, and make them have to make different decisions. Like you can't hyperspace. It's too powerful to stick around and try to dominate the map, because it's just too much. And so how do you get them to have that panic moment? And I just loved in 7, as soon as I had, and then even the VO kind of reinforces it. It's like you have 1 minute until you can hyperspace or whatever. And as soon as I got that, I didn't, as I would typically do, stick around and try to just take everything out and dominate and then mine everything. I was like, nope, I'm out of here. I don't care what state I'm in. I'm leaving,
Yeah.
And that was cool.
I mean, the
difference.
thing is there's not a lot left for you to collect at that point in that level. There's some scrap from things that you've taken out. But
the nebula, much. You can mine the nebula itself, right? Just to some degree.
It felt like when I finished it, there was not a lot of stuff left for me.
Maybe not. Maybe the nebula isn't as rich as everything else. I did a little bit of mining of the nebula, but other than
it's a little weird, because I think it's like, it says that it announces that kind of at the start of the mission while you're entering the nebula. It's messing with our sensors and blah blah blah, and it shows there's 3 interesting points. And I tried to maybe that was 8 though. I was like, I tried to make and send a probe to one of them, because I'm like, well, what's that all about? But it felt like at the end of 7, which I did beat, and I beat it. I just was sitting there with a bunch of disabled ships because they had no fuel pods, and I chased off all the capital ships, and I was just sitting there. Like, I didn't have to go.
Interesting. Yeah. So I felt more panicked. Yeah.
Yeah. But the panic, I think, is the intended feeling. I mean, like I said, I remember it from when Chris was playing and when I played it originally, that I felt that way. But then I got to the next mission, and I'm pretty sure 8 is where I stopped. Because I was just like, how am I going to...
You can do it.
How am I even going to do this? Yeah, well, I think what I'm going to do is go back to 5, because I felt like getting into 6 and 7 that I was under...
Maybe.
That I just didn't have enough stuff. Because I'm typically going through with... There was one time when I had like 80 ships, which is well short of your cap, because I think you can have 70... straight up 70 interceptors. Or a mix of interceptors and other fighters, I guess. And I think the defenders maybe take up 2 slots or something like that. One of them takes up, one of them you can have fewer of, and I think you can just mix and match and it adds up. Anyway, that was kind of my...
Yeah, it's a weird...
I did save, like, at the end of 5, when I was like, all right, I'm going to move on now. I made a save, because I was like, is this a mistake? This feels like a mistake.
Yeah.
That's kind of the problem. I mean, I guess my final thoughts for this episode is, I'm not sure, especially in 8. I don't know what my mistake was. Like, I don't know what tactical error I made. I knew I made one in 5. Not the mining thing, but just like how I approached it. I was like, ooh, that went a lot worse than it should have. I got through it. It was fine, but then I left without mining everything. And I'm like, well, maybe that's my mistake for 8. And that's a problem. That my mistake was 3 levels ago, or whatever. I mean, I lost a ton of ships on 6 as well, but I feel like I went in with 80 to that and then came out with like 45 and was like just devastated.
Yeah.
So that's another.
They have to. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like in 7, when I started 7, it was 6 or 7 that I saw my resource units tick up to like 10K for some reason.
Yeah.
And I don't really know why. I don't know if they were trying to auto balance, like I said earlier, but I agree with you. I mean, I feel like it's gotta be, the solution can't be going back to 5. But maybe in this game it is. It feels very punishing to do that, and that's even a concept in a game like this, which there's no other game that does that I can think of. It's such a weird thing, and it definitely feels. It feels punishing to me.
With 5, I mean, I would have done it in the moment. I was like, I have to move on because I'll never.
Yeah, you had to external
for the podcast. So I mean, in the moment, I was like, yeah, I should just mine. There's a bunch of stuff left over that they were mining, and plus I can mine their ships' remains and whatever. And I did it for several minutes. And I just got to the point where they were so far away, and I was just like, and the collectors move slowly, but then the other one moves even slower still. So it's just like catching that thing up to them constantly. I mean, it was very sort of just plodding, and I was just like, well, this is where I would hit the plus key on most games, which was the thing back then. You could on an RTS,
increase speed,
you increase the speed or decrease the speed. I would love to decrease the speed on this game often, down to like hardly moving.
And I think my mistakes so far have been very much around, I think, wanting to be better at that sort of advanced rock paper scissors play we're talking about, and not being. I do think that there's a smart, even elegant design in there about which units to use against what units and when, and how to escort and how to use formations and all of that stuff. And I feel like they haven't really taught you well enough by the time you get to 8 to really get that. Although 8's, I guess from an enemy unit perspective, 8's sort of simple because you have the drones and you have the capital ships, and that's kind of it. There's not like medium-sized craft, but I feel like I'm not a master of my fleet the way I want to be, and I feel like I said earlier, my mistakes often have been I'm too antsy and I go after the capital ship without the right force, and then they just get eaten up, and I've just wasted all those resources.
Right.
So, yeah,
it's tricky. It's tricky. I mean, it's hard to be a fleet commander these days. So,
at
least it's real.
Especially if you've been ingested into the mothership.
Especially
your consciousness is.
It's not good for anyone. All right, well, let's just put a pin in it there. We will see. We are nominally at the halfway part of this game. I think there are 16 missions, which is why we played up to 8 this time. I have no idea really what to expect because, as we have pointed out, there's been some variety in the missions, and they are very story focused in a way. At least earlier RTSs of the time didn't quite feel to me. This feels like a definite storytelling step forward in some ways. It's a story of a whole people, and
it's well done. It's economical too. I mean, StarCraft was known, and Warcraft were known for their cinematics, so they tried, but it's a different tone.
Yeah. But let's turn and at least get a couple emails done. We have they've been piling up a little bit from Trespasser, and we're still getting through those. They were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. Take it away, sir. Well, let's do 2 each. We'll each read one.
Okay. Subject: game releases: The Simpsons and God of War. Okay. From Mikhail. Hello. Greetings, gentlemen. While I never played Trespasser, something Brett said in the takeaways section got me thinking of something I've often wondered in general about game development and releases. Quote, no one sets out to make a bad game, was the quote. That's the second time this week I heard someone say just that, and so I figured this might just be the best opportunity to ask about this. As a preamble to my question, I want to start with something I remember from listening to DVD commentary tracks of one of the earlier seasons of The Simpsons. They were talking about jokes and how even the funniest often seem to get less and less funny in subsequent script readings and revisions. Sometimes they consider replacing these jokes or just cutting them altogether. And I think it was Matt Groening who said that he often tried to remind people how funny the joke they found the joke the first time and to trust that instinct. While game development happens on a completely different timescale than a script for The Simpsons, is there ever a time closer to release especially that you seriously question some or many parts of the game everyone previously agreed was great, despite these parts not really having been subject to change since then, just because of time going by and seeing or playing it over and over? And as a consequence of that, do you get the feeling that you really don't have a sense of whether or not a game will actually resonate with critics and players? Too long, the TLDR version, when close to release, do game devs feel like they don't know if their game is actually good? Are good or bad scores ever a big surprise? I think what originally sparked this question was seeing the video of Cory Barlog finally getting to see the review scores of God of War. And this was the game I was thinking of too. So that makes sense. And what looked like utter relief when seeing the overwhelmingly positive scores. After playing the game, loving all the changes they made, like adding real character development, making Kratos into so much more of a real person, someone who struggles with his emotions and his relationship to his son, I was surprised that it looked like that much of a relief to see the reception the game got. Of course, there could have been a lot of late changes, fixes for things that didn't really work, or a number of things going on behind the scenes that everyone else is not privy to. But I still started to feel that there was some sort of parallel that could be drawn to what I remember the Simpsons writers talking about all those years later. Sorry for the long rant. Feel free to mercilessly chop this down to size if you read it on the air. Stay awesome. Regards, Mikhail.
Yeah, originally this was 10 times as long. No, I'm kidding. I'll let you read it in its entirety. I'll give an anecdote from my own experience. We did not know with Skyrim, which, just from a scores perspective, was like a 96, 97, something like that. It's my, I only had one thing left to do after Skyrim, because Skyrim got all 10s at Famitsu, which I honestly never thought I'd achieve in my career, to work on a game that got the max score out of Famitsu, the Japanese magazine. Anyway, so I had no sense that Skyrim was anywhere near that good. We had a team meeting, I want to say like 5 months out from release, something like that. It was like June of 2011. And Istvan Peli is the lead artist for the Fallout games. And he was working towards Fallout 4, I believe, at the time. So he was just like doing art direction stuff, figuring out what the next game in that series would look like. He wasn't working on Skyrim. And he finally played it that month and came to the team meeting, and he was like, he's like, here's what I like. All of it. Here's what I hate. None of it. And it was the first time somebody had played it, without having worked on it every day. And was like, it's great. Like it's awesome. Just, you did it. It's amazing. And he could have come in that day and said, oh man, we're in trouble. And I would have entirely believed him, because when you're developing, it's sort of like you're the lobster in the pot. you can't tell whether it's getting better in some ways because you saw it when it was nothing, and it's only been incrementally changing from there, and so it's like, well, it's getting different. Certainly it's changing, it's getting bigger. It's all, those games are also very big, so it's kind of hard to see it all and kind of have a sense of the whole sometimes. But it's also like you're so inured to it at that point. You're sort of just like, well, this is what it is. I don't think it's hard to have a critical eye towards it at all. So that was my experience. Was I had no idea. I was so relieved. And then reviewers bore Istvan's opinions out. And I guess so did people who played it, because a lot of copies were sold of that game. How about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. I thought of the recent God of War example too, because we actually had colleagues that were on that said the same thing. That was revealed later from Corey and others. It's like, we weren't really sure. It was such a rough, road that it could have been either way. So happy surprise there. For me personally, it's been both. It's been all over the map. I mean, I think it's every game. Yeah. Every game is like this. To Brett's point, not only do you get so close to it, but you convince yourself of things that aren't true. Other people convince you of things. I've had the experience where the opposite of what you said, where somebody came to us saying the game is going to be well received, and then it wasn't. So it's like anyone's guess. But the truth of the email, and the truth to Brett's point, is the people working on it. And that's why user testing is so important. That's why, though it's a double-edged sword, sometimes focus group testing is important. Like all of that stuff, validation can help if you're trying to build whatever, a marketing plan or something, but really just make the game better. But really, teams are just always so close. Like to the opposite of the Simpsons analogy, I think if I just use that analogy lock stock, there are times when you convince yourself a joke is really funny. Yeah. And you're like, yep, it's definitely going to land. That's a funny joke. And I'm obviously not in a game, but I'm just saying, using the analogy. Yeah. And then it goes out and it falls flat. So it's really difficult. Yeah. And I feel like for me, at least, every game is very much like you close your eyes and you push it out the door, and then you just like take cover and hope for the best. And you just try to make it good every single day. That's all you can do.
One of the reasons why it can be hard, I remember we talked about this a lot back on Republic Commando, was as developers, we might think it's better than it is because it was so much worse before. And one of the things you were always reminding us of was like the players only see the finished product. They don't see what it took to get there. They didn't see the bad versions or the worst versions. Not even say the bad versions, because the version you ship might still be bad. They just see where you ended. And they don't know the story of how you got there. I remember one of the worst things ever said about a game I worked on was Jedi Starfighter. It was a total blurb, and it was like, the AI must stand for artificial idiocy, because whatever freighters didn't, however they flew, they didn't. I don't remember the specifics, but it was like the way the freighters took off and were kind of undefended, or not, couldn't defend themselves or something, didn't make a lot of sense to the reviewer. And I remember this because we tried it another way, and that was worse than what we ended up with, and could it have been better still? Probably. I mean, apparently for that reviewer, I mean, that one stung because I wrote all the AI for most of the Starfighter games. There was definitely some stuff that I got help from on the second one, but not those. That was all me. So the artificial idiocy will stick with me forever. Thanks, EGM.
Oof.
Yep. Well,
EGM isn't around anymore.
No, they're not. Yeah, they're not. I remember the editor there I think he might have even wrote it. Anyway, I probably have it. So it's probably in this house somewhere.
It's good to keep, stay.
It keeps me humble. I've learned a lot since then. I would write the AI very differently these days. Anyway, I'll read one quickly. We're already at an hour 10, but let's see. I don't remember if there's a ton of questions in this. Oh yeah, there is kind of a question here, which is a setting this game in its time thing. Thoughts on Trespasser? This is from Will Crosby. He says, "Hi, Brett and Tim. I've been thinking about the really consistently weird design choices that you were both calling out. I remember that in that era, there are always waves of, quote, Hollywood types coming into the game space saying that we need to show these upstarts about how to do fill in your blank. Invariably, they would retreat, tail between their legs, once they realized that while games are displayed on screens, they are fundamentally different from linear storytelling. As I recall, one of the criticisms I heard about games back in that era was that the controller stood between the player and the experience. The player wasn't really interacting with the world. It was mediated via obtuse button presses. Wouldn't it be more immersive, the thinking went, if instead of the player doing X that stood for the action, if they could do the action themselves? We were still 5 years away from Jim G's What Video Games Have to Teach Us About Learning and Literacy, and probably many other game studies papers from Digra, that celebrated the hybrid self that merged player action and agency with an avatar character's capabilities to project ourselves into the game world without having to do the analogous task in real life. I think that Trespasser was trying to fulfill a flawed vision of interaction that posits that if you aren't actually doing the task, then you must be less immersed in the world. And the world should be able to respond in reasonable ways to player actions because of the time period that fell to the physics subsystem. I wonder if Trespasser would have been able to deliver on some more of its interaction premise if it had been on the PS2 with an iToy, or if it was a Kinect game, or if players had to put on a Rococo smart suit. Never heard of one of those, but okay. I'm wondering if either of you remember hearing similar things from the movie folks trying to move to games at that time. One more thing. I was listening to Alex Seropian's Fourth Curtain podcast when he was interviewing Noah Falstein. Noah dropped some tidbits about how Trespasser elbowed its way to the front of the line and scaled up their development team at the time when he was leading a different project at DreamWorks. It's a brief 2-minute clip. It starts, et cetera, et cetera. I'll give you the link to that in the show notes, I guess. Thank you for your commitment to the medium of games and letting us all peek behind the curtain through your years of experience. Happy holidays, Will Crosby. Hope your holidays were great. We are, of course, well into January now. Because we're slow on the email. What are you going to do? What do you think? Is it the guys with clipboards that ruined it all?
Well, I mean, it is a good reminder at the end of the email that it was a DreamWorks interactive game. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And there were, I mean, I think he's correct in that, I think they're correct in that this has always been a weird challenge where, especially once games got bigger and bigger, where people from especially film were trying to, come in and try to, they're, genuinely trying to help or trying to instill something from their medium into our medium. There, I don't have specific quotes or anything, but there definitely were a handful of those with George Lucas in my time there, where there's some interactions and some suggestions that you're not sure if whether you should take them seriously or not. And I think he's totally trying to help, totally trying to put his input into things.
The rule of thumb was if he said it once, you could ignore it, but if he said it twice, you had to listen.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, I mean, rule, I guess, we'll take that for whatever. But it's probably the same thing as if we were to go into film and try to suggest things as well on our side, making things more immersive or something, right? Like making a film into first person mode the whole time, which other than the gimmicky movies that did that, it can be silly to see a whole movie that way. But yeah, I think, there's such a weird perfect storm with Trespasser. I feel like not only was it backed by DreamWorks, and we know that that Spielberg and his son were involved or whatever, but there's also the sort of looking glass, X looking glass kind of element, and just sort of like trying to make simulation based, immersive sim kind of stuff going on at the same time. But who knows, really? I don't think the clipboards came in and ruined this game by any means. I think that, they were just trying to do too much too early.
Yeah.
And didn't, it's stuff we talked about.
My recollection at the time also is that there were complaints in the games industry that there were people who clearly wanted to make movies and were in games.
Yeah.
And not, I mean, just because they couldn't get into movies. So they went to this other thing, and they were doing things, that were, they were taking control away from the player far too often, and, doing these, especially at the time, very remedial cutscenes and to ensure their vision. And, I definitely remember sort of like, let games be games, being kind of a thing. And that was my recollection of how the industry was kind of having friction with movies. I guess it's true that there was some coming the other direction. But
FMV, right? Like FMV, yeah. The concept of that is like putting a movie inside of a game, but making it interactive in a weird way.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. Seventh Guest. I mean, not a bad game, but not a lot of game. It's kind of fairly little game because there's so much of the cutscene. But yeah, I mean, that's my real memory of the time. I do think that there was a certain amount of, like, you don't know how to tell stories coming from film. But
the funny thing about that is it's come full circle now.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's like people come into the industry and we say to them, you don't know how to tell stories for games.
Right.
It's just a whole different problem to solve.
Yeah. Actually, I feel like Tom Bissell wrote, was it Tom? I think Tom Bissell wrote something where he was referring to, a director or something like that, who's like, well, okay, well, we'll put the camera here, and Tom Bissell would have to say, no, you can't put the camera there. The camera's at such and such place over the shoulder or whatever. And they're like, well, we'll just put it here. And I'm like, it's a game. You're not allowed to, you can't control the camera. In fact, they might not even be looking that way. They might have turned and looked the other way. And the person going, oh, huh. And that was definitely later than the sort of 90s. But, to your point, I don't think, I tend to agree that I don't think Trespasser's problem was the film people came in and ruined it. I don't even think the interaction model was necessarily that. I mean, the other game that I think of at the time that had a sort of similar thing going for it was Die by the Sword, which had no film interaction at all, but tried to do something similar with the sword fighting, where the mouse kind of controlled where the sword was, and it was kind of a weird feeling game, because it was very similar to Trespasser in that, like, your arm felt super, you felt like you couldn't really make it do what you wanted to do. That had no film stuff at all. That was really just people like, can I make it feel more, realistic, and had nothing to do with film coming in.
Immersive, and yeah. No, that's a good point. Well, I don't know if the person sending the email in was going in this direction, but you could totally see Trespasser being a VR game for all of the same sort of shenanigan reasons, right? Where you have your hands in front of you and you're kind of fumbling around, picking up guns and pushing boxes, and that's now kind of having a renaissance because of VR,
right? Especially room scale VR. Can you imagine? Oh boy. I can't really imagine.
Key. It's remaking Trespasser in VR.
There you go. That's what you need to be spending your time on, Tim. Clearly. Well, we'll leave it there. Thanks for the emails, Will and Mikhail. And we appreciate those. Thanks for sending them in to devgameclub@gmail.com. I actually do want to read one other thing. I almost forgot this, and let me track it down here. And it's another one that's a little on the long side, but I don't want to miss it. It's about defeating games for charity. This is from Nolan Filter. I got a couple of these too. And his is, probably fun because Nolan's funny. It says, "Greetings, Brent and Tim. It's Calamity Nolan with an official announcement from many members of the Discord fan community going out to all the Dev Game Club listeners. Defeating Games for Charity is coming January 27th to 28th. We're doing a video game marathon on Twitch, playing and beating the games that Tim didn't finish, raising money for the Video Game History Foundation. We got Dark Souls, we got Rogue, we got Far Cry 2, we got multiple Mega Men, and we got so much more after that. I myself am speedrunning Devil May Cry, and Tim will give XCOM another go live on stream. We need your help to hit our donation goal, which unlocks NES Game Master Kaon, I don't know who that is, beating Metroid in under an hour. Please mark your calendars, tell your friends, and prepare your wallets if able. Head on over to defeatinggames.com to learn more, and they even got a website. And we hope to see you all there at noon EST on January 27th for Artemage kicking off the event with Final Fantasy IX. Sincerely, Calamity Nolan and the Defeating Games for Charity team. Special thanks to all the amazing people working on this event, which includes streamers Artemage, Belmont, Bivron, I don't even know how to pronounce that one, Kaon, Kyle, and Error, Lost Lake Mystery Dip, and one Tim Longo with a JR at the end, scheduler, organizer, Biostats, and the artist website dev Mark Garcia. Everyone's time and expertise is greatly appreciated. I was going to get in on this, but life intervened. I don't know. My weekends have been tough times to schedule things like this because I'm often prepping for D&D. And I think I missed their deadline. So apologies that I am not participating. Maybe when Tim is doing his, maybe I'll just jump in on your stream. You can have me in a window, and I can tell you how you're doing your XCOM wrong.
That would be wonderful. That's just, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay.
It's so awesome to see so many of them all banding together for this. I don't know if that's a site that they put together, or if that's just an existing site, Defeating Game. I forget, but yeah, the whole thing is well organized, and there's a lot of participation, and I'm so glad I didn't finish so many games that we could actually have an event about this.
No, this site is you. The icon is one. Well, you've seen it on a T-shirt of mine, and a backpack of mine.
All right, they've gone too far. Then they've gone too far.
It's got the Final Fantasy font. And you're the thing in between. It's pretty good.
Mark sent it to me. Sent me the link, and I just thought it was like a site that tracks beating games or something. This
is the schedule. They've got pictures of all the games, and who's playing them, and all of that stuff, and the schedule and everything. So
this is incredible. They've done such a good job. Yeah. So definitely come and watch. Please support them and everything that they're up to. All right. Well, very cool. I will I will actually go out and put out a tweet this week and say, hey, by the way, listen to the end. There's an announcement, and maybe we can front end it next week as it gets closer. We should keep. Yeah, we definitely, because next week will be the last episode before it goes live. Very cool. All right. Well, you can send us email at devgameclub@gmail.com, as I mentioned before. And we love to get your reviews. Haven't had one in a minute. I see the Apple ones, but if there are other places you're putting them, please send them in. We'd love to read them on air. We're on the web at devgameclub.com. Technically, I guess still on Twitter at devgameclub. And Tim sometimes twitches at twitch.tv/ Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end. We also, as you may have heard from that email, have a fan-run Discord. It's a nice place to hang out. You should go check it out. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo, that Discord, so many things, by Mark Garcia. Have fun drag pulling all of your resource collectors. Oh no, I totally messed that up. Have fun drag putting all your resource collectors in one basket this week.
And good night.
Good night. I hope you keep all of that in, to be honest.
I don't know. We'll see.